Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the service this morning. This will be the second in a series of discussion circles around Indigenous history and Indigenous reconciliation here at Kelowna Unitarians. Last month, we had a guest come, Debbie Hubbard, who shared with us about the Doctrine of Discovery, which is an incredibly important piece of history in the colonization of Canada. Today, I want to share with you all about the history of Indigenous peoples of this land that predates the Doctrine of Discovery. We're going to have a visual exercise for the people who are in the sanctuary. I have a string here. It's folded up a whole bunch for the people on Zoom to see. And I'm going to unstretch it. It's roughly 13 meters long, or at least 13 arm spans long. And there are white beads for every millennia. So we're going to be talking about 13,000 years of history. For people who are on Zoom, we also have a PowerPoint that's going to come along, and I'll ask Casey to get that started up while I pass out the string. All right, now I'm going to try and do some fancy camera work and turn the chalice camera around so that people can see. Sorry, Casey, can you spotlight the sanctuary camera for me?
It should be spotlighted.
You can hear me. People online couldn't hear me. So I'm just zoomed around the room for it, and you'll see people holding their hands up as we go along. All right. So we start our history 12,000 years ago, 10,000 BCE. And flint arrowheads were found in areas of present-day Alberta, Montana, and North and South Dakota. This was 12,000 years ago, and this actually suggests that humans were here at that point in time. Indigenous people were here at that point in time, and they were using tools. So Phyllis, your little bead in your hand represents 10,000 years ago. That's the oldest history that we can find on this land at this point in time. Casey, next slide, please. So the second bead, which Jane is holding there, is 9,000 BCE. So this is, BCE stands for before current era, and 0 of BCE is, well, we'll get there in a bit. So this is the oldest well-documented bison kills that happened in North America. These were actually located in Winnipeg, or in the Manitoba area, and they date back to 11,000 years. These animals would have actually been smaller than our present day bison, and they're actually an extinct subspecies of the bison. Additionally to these bison kills, we also have seen archaeological records that confirm campsites in New Brunswick and along the northwest coast of this country. So those are dating back 11,000 years. Casey, next slide, please. I believe the next bead is in between Mary's two hands. So that represents 9,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, sorry, in 8,000 BCE. There are over 700 archaeological sites in the area. That's supposed to say Banff National Park, not Band. The area that is now called Banff National Park. These include artifacts, evidence of campsites, butchering sites, and much more. Additionally, there is evidence of a settlement in the lower Fraser Valley dating back to this time period. And it is at this point in time, 8,000 BCE, that we start seeing people on the other side of the world in the Indus Valley having domesticated goats and cows. So the Indus Valley is the valley that runs along the Arabian Sea in modern day Pakistan. So this is an attempt to give you an idea of Western and Indigenous history on the same timeline. Next slide, please. (7,000 BCE. I think this might be in between where Mary and Connie are sitting. Right above Remy's head is the bead on our timeline. There are various archaeological sites that date back this time, including some in Calgary, Cypress Hills, and Porcupine Hills, which are all in Alberta, as well as along the Manitoba escarpment, which I didn't even know that Manitoba had an escarpment. So this is a picture of the Manitoba escarpment. Next slide, please, Casey. (5,000 BCE, around the same time as we were just talking about, there is evidence of proto-cities, which is a word that's used to describe a prehistorical settlement that had both rural and urban features. And this picture is taken from the space is current day Palestine, in a city that is now called Jericho on the West Bank. And so this picture is an archaeological dig that found a proto-city in that area. So at the same time as campsites and villages were found in Alberta and Manitoba, we see proto-cities in the Middle East. Next slide, please. (4,000 BCE, so this is 6,000 years ago. There is a park that is currently called White Shield Provincial Park in southeast Manitoba, close to the Ontario border. And there are flat pink granite structures that are called petroforms. So it's very clear to archaeologists that these rock placements that you see in this picture were created by individuals living in 4,000 BCE. As well, there's also evidence that they were mining copper in east of Lake Superior at the same time. So lots of evidence of more settled communities in this area. Next slide, Casey. So the first agricultural communities are located in Mesopotamia, which is in modern day Iraq. And if, Wayne, are you able to move the video there for people in the sanctuary? So the two blue rivers are the Euphrates, I'm not going to say that right. Euphrates, thank you, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And Mesopotamia actually means between the rivers. And so this is where we see the first agricultural communities developing in the Middle East. At the same point in time on this continent, we see the oldest archaeological findings of bison driving. So what that means is that large groups of indigenous peoples would gather together and drive dozens and perhaps even hundreds of bison over an escarpment, most notably known in southern Alberta, near Lethbridge. And these settlements would trap, kill, and then process dozens and dozens of bison in order to survive the harsh winter climates of southern Alberta. So these two times are happening continents apart at the same time. Next slide, please. Also around 3000 BCE or 5,000 years ago, indigenous peoples are moving from northeastern Siberia into what is current day Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. As well, we also see evidence of people traveling from Greenland and the Scandinavian countries into modern day Nunavut and northern Quebec. And I want to pause here for a second to share this video with you. Oh, hopefully it'll come back up in a second. So this is a video of two Inuit women singing together. It's called throat singing. And this is a way that Inuit women would have fun together in igloos or when people were away hunting. All of the noises that you're going to hear in this video are made by the inhalation and exhalation of air through their throat and the constriction and relaxing of their throat muscles. Inuit women would not sing in unison, actually. They would sing half a second behind the other person. So instead of hearing the same noise at the same time, you're hearing the same noise at one point and then the exact same noise at half a second later. It comes up with this really rhythmic song. And so usually these songs last as long as it takes for somebody to run out of air or start laughing. And this is called Love Song, and it's being sung by Rit, Mike, and Mary Mika. So I'll have Casey start the video. So again, that's called throat singing, and you'll see it a couple more times today. So back to our history lesson. I think I'm just going to move the camera a little bit along, and Casey can bring up the PowerPoint. Lila, maybe you can wave your hand at the camera for everybody. So here we are on our timeline over near Lila. And we start to see, I mentioned this already, but additional routes that were traveled between Scandinavian countries of Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, into Greenland, and then Labrador, Nova Scotia, and Nunavut. And one of the earliest settlements that we find in this area of the land is where that little red star is, and that is a modern day hamlet that is called Kinnigat. So there are still people living in that space today. So that little star there in Nunavut. Next slide, please. So just to try and bring you back into a sense of some of the history that you might be aware of in other parts of the world, In 2550 BCE is the time to which archaeologists have dated the Egyptian pyramids and the Egyptian Sphinx, which is often considered one of the oldest, sorry, I'm just trying to adjust the microphone, often considered one of the oldest structures in human history. And so I just want to lift up how much history we actually have evidence of before this time period of 2550 BCE. So that's about where Bonnie is sitting in our room. Next slide, please. So on the right, you will see an island that's in the north of Lake Superior. And there are significant amounts of settlements found on this island. It's called the Slate Islands, and it's in Ontario area, so the north end of Lake Superior, with dozens of campsites and artifacts found about 1,000 years before the current era. And then moving forward about 450 years is, oh, sorry, Casey, go back to that previous one. This person is Confucius, so regularly considered the oldest religious philosophy. Confucianism's founder, Confucius, was born in 551 BCE. All right, thanks, Casey. Next slide. Alexander the Great was the conqueror of the Persian Empire, and that happened in 331 BCE. And about 500 BCE, the Forum in Rome was built, and this was the site that was used for important religious and political activities. So that's the structure that's on the bottom side there. Next slide, Casey. I think Connie went downstairs to grab something. So year zero, which I think might actually be where Keith was sitting before. There are two pink stones there. So Jesus of Nazareth was born 33 BCE, and year zero is the year that is considered to be Jesus's death on the cross. Although now there is some suggestion that that isn't actually accurate, that he probably died in the year 2, or somewhere in the later half of year 1. So this is just a suggestion of, or year 0 is the beginning of our calendar of the Common Era. So we are currently in year 2021 of this Common Era, and year 0 was the year that Jesus was supposedly killed. Next slide, please. So during the first millennia of the current era, the first 1,000 years of the current era, lots of things in this. Oh. Sorry for everybody who is on Zoom. We had a dog water bowl get knocked over, so that's what's happening there. And then Keith tried to get tangled up in our timeline. Yes, it was. So during the first millennia of the current era, St. Augustine, who was really influential in the growth of Christianity and actually the development, quote unquote, development of the Roman Latin Church, which is now known as Catholicism. And he was alive he was born in 354 and died in 430. Muhammad, who is the prophet of Islam and of the Muslim faith, was born in 570 and died in 632. And then we start to see the first agricultural settlements found in southern Ontario in between what is now known as Mississauga and London. And those are dating back to roughly 1050 years CE. And these were Iroquois speaking people, also known as the Haudenosaunee. So next slide, please, Casey. Just another timeline for you to recognize. The Renaissance, which is fairly popular in Western history, began in 1350 in Italy. And Columbus began to explore the New World in that's wrong. It's supposed to be 1442. Sorry about that. 1492. Look at that. It was not drilled into me, apparently. In 1534, Jacques Cartier started traveling along the coast of Nitasan, the territory of the Inuit people, which is located in what is now known as northern Quebec and Labrador. The Inuit, while becoming heavily involved with the Jesuits and developing a strong economy through the fur trade, will remain among the most traditional of Canada's First Nations. So there are a lot of Inuit people still in northern Quebec, Labrador, and into Nunavut who are still living their traditional lives that happened pre-colonization. Next slide, please. The first Europeans to regularly visit North America were from Basque, which is a people from the modern day era of the France and Spain area. In the 16th century, there was an extensive trade contact and overall really friendly exchanges between the Basque whalers and the Mi'kmaq people of current day Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. The relationship grew to the point where there was actually a development of a hybrid language where some of the words were Basque and some of the words were Algonquin. And that language was still used for over 200 years. So there were many, many generations who had this immersive language between French and Spanish, which is Basque, and then the Algonquin language of the Mi'kmaq people. And in that little picture, all of the red dots are where the Basque whalers would do their hunting. So all over the area of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and Labrador. Next slide, please. So that same area where there is the Mi'kmaq people was actually divided into 7 distinct councils. So, I forgot to put the date. I think it was 1711. There was a union, a grand council of these 7 distinct council groups within the Mi'kmaq people. And they were representatives from each one of these councils, as well as elders and a women's council, and they all came together in 1711 and created a grand council. And this was their form of government. And it was used right up until 1876 when the Indian Act was put into place. So we can think about this in our own understanding of provinces coming together to create a larger council, a grand council of Mi'kmaq people. Next slide, please. The beaver was hunted into extinction in Europe, and thus Indigenous communities were the world's supplier in beaver pelts. And these pelts were really, really important because they're actually waterproof. So you could wear it and not have any problems with rain or snow or anything like that. And Indigenous communities actively and strategically negotiated this economy in order to obtain labor-saving materials such as guns and ammunition and copper cookware. So there was a huge amount of trade and support between people when European settlers first came to this land. Next slide, please. This is the last slide of our history. This is 1701. And this is when a peace treaty was created within Montreal between the 5 Haudenosaunee nations and New France. There was a war happening that happened for almost a century, starting in 1609 and running 1701. The century of warfare between French and the 5 Haudenosaunee or Iroquois First Nations was marked by a series of military expeditions and guerrilla raids. It was initiated by Samuel de Champlain in 1609, and he joined a war party of Algonquin and Huron-Wendat against the Mohawk and the Lake Champlain region. He thus inserted the French into a war that was already happening among Indigenous peoples here and made a web of alliances and enemies that characterized North America's Indigenous conflict at the same time. In doing so, he was able to strengthen the interest of New France in the fur trade. And so at this point, we start to see the politics between English Europeans and French Europeans and Spanish Europeans start to have a really significant influence on the people who lived in this land before it became Canada. And it's shortly after this time period when the idea of the Doctrine of Discovery that you were introduced to last month really started to take place. And so I want to leave our snapshot there, but just I'm hoping that the visual was really helpful to get an understanding of the history that most of us are really familiar with, the history of the Egyptian temples, maybe Mesopotamia, the history of Rome, and the history that's happened on this continent going back 10,000 years. And now, because I already showed you one example of throat singing, I want to show you a second. This video was taken in 2017. This is the summer before Adam and I moved to Kelowna. He and I went down to a celebration about Ontario's history in Ontario Place, which is in Toronto. And I got the opportunity to learn how to throat sing. So you might not recognize me because I have very short hair, but I'm wearing a purple sweater. And this is a video of me learning how to throat sing.
E, 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 E. Easy enough, right? Okay. Now everybody all together say ha. 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 No, I can hear you a bit louder than that. Ha. 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 Now this time don't try to go too loud. Say ha with just your breath. No voice. Now don't do it too many times in a row because you will get lightheaded and we don't want that. Now take your left hand or your right hand, whatever is your free hand, put it over your throat and go and try to make it vibrate. So okay, now we're going to put the sounds together, okay? So starting with E, 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 E. Does anybody else want to come on the mic and try it? E, E. Yeah, do you want to come join us? E, 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 E. Keep going. Can you guys keep singing with her? Wait, keep going. So, we need your help, okay? So that she doesn't get thrown off. I need you to sing with her as loud as you can, so that you can support her in trying this. Let's try it one more time, okay? Because now I'm going to do something a bit different. So just follow Reed and follow everybody else. Ready?